Hello and welcome to the 9th of our sessions on Holy Habits. My name is Nicola and I'm the Children and Youth Development Officer for the Eastern Synod of the United Reformed Church. We are continuing to look at the holy habit of sharing resources, and in this session looking from an intergenerational perspective. When thinking about resource sharing and giving, our minds tend to jump instantly to thinking about money, possessions and tangible assets. But when thinking from an intergenerational perspective, it is perhaps more about sharing ourselves, our stories, our skills, ideas and time. In Acts chapter 2 verse 47, Luke says the believers enjoyed the goodwill of all the people. They had all things in common. How do we as a church community give opportunity for our young people and children to share their story and gifts? If we are truly intergenerational in our outlook, then all ages will always be considered. I want to share with you a video about sharing our story.
I wonder where our story takes place today. Shall we have a look and see? Today's story is in the desert. And the desert is a cold and lonely place. In the daytime, the heat is scorching. And at night, it's very cold. Now, in the desert, there were some travellers. And they'd come to rest for the night around a campfire. Old and young, children, men and women, grandparents, every generation sharing together stories. Stories about their special treasure. Stories of things that were important to them, just like this precious gem. Now, in the distance, there were strangers who were travelling in the desert. And the strangers saw the campfire. And they saw the families gathered together. And they stood and they watched from a distance. But those sitting round the campfire noticed them and went out to meet them and welcome them. Come and join us round the campfire. And so they did. And as they gathered together round the heat of the fire, sharing food, they continued to share stories that were precious to them, just like this precious gem. The next day, they set off on their journey towards the city. And the strangers travelled with them. And as they travelled, old and young, children, grandparents, parents, aunties, uncles, friends gathered together, shared stories of their precious treasure. Some went on to the city, and together they continued to share in all that the city had to offer: the bright lights, the music, the wonderful food. And they stayed together and gathered together and continued to share their stories, while others continued on their journey. seeking and searching. I wonder, what would be your special treasure? What would you share with others? I wonder what you think this story is about. I wonder, would you be in the city? Or would you still be travelling? I wonder what you liked best about this story. I wonder if I could have left anything out. I wonder.
2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7. Each one of you should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not out of regret or compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. John Proctor writes about the holy habit of resource sharing. Your local church is the place where that family meets your life. As Christians, we belong together, depend on one another, and grow through sharing in work and worship. We know Christ better when we see his light reflected in other people's lives. Local church makes that experience real. Through the work that we do with toddler groups, after-school clubs, dad's breakfasts and messy church, just to name but a few, we can meet families and share together, cheerfully responding to the needs of others in our work with families and modelling our faith. A description of the early stages of faith development help our understanding of sharing of ourselves. We are loved into knowing and feeling, and we are loved into being. How often do we truthfully answer the question, "How are you?" Or how often do we ask it without really wanting to hear more than the briefest of answers? Sharing of ourselves honestly with families, children and young people, making our groups safe places where the highs and lows can be honestly shared, are part of our resource sharing. We all want children to grow up healthily and successful. We also want children to be grateful for what they have been given and have compassion for those who are in need. Teaching children the spirit of giving, showing them the importance of thinking of others, and modelling kindness are important ways to help children grow into loving members of our world. Luke chapter 6 verse 38. If you give to others, you will be given a full amount in return. It will be packed down, shaken together, and spilling over into your lap. The way you treat others is the way you will be treated. Full to overflowing. This picture shows a simple science experiment I often use with children and young people to talk about the abundance of God's love and generosity to us. And it offers a good illustration to the Bible verse from Luke. Simple but effective, it can be used in an all-age context. If we give to others, then we will be given a full amount, overflowing, in return. How do we encourage children and young people to give of their gifts? Perhaps before considering this question, we should look at what we do to enable them to understand and appreciate that they all have something to give. From the smallest gesture of a smile to serving refreshment or helping on the sound desk, there are so many ways in which young people can give. No matter how small the gift or gesture, it is like a small seed planted that with the right nurture will grow into something much bigger. Like an acorn to an oak tree with deep solid roots, bearing fruit. I want to share with you some resources that you can use to help talk about the holy habit of resource sharing with all ages. A great favourite of mine is Have You Filled Your Bucket Today? Each of us carries an imaginary bucket. When you do something kind, you fill someone's bucket. When you do something mean, you dip into someone's bucket and remove some good thoughts and feelings. Children and adults are taught a metaphor to be kind and loving towards themselves and to others. It would make a great resource for an all-age session on resource sharing. Here are 4 books that I like to think of as modern-day parables. Each of these books illustrates well the holy habit in amusing and colourful ways that can be used in an all-age service or as resources for toddler groups and junior church. In an all-age service, it's surprising how much adults will gain from a children's story. Sharing a shell. When Crab finds a new shell, he doesn't want to share it with anyone, especially not a blobby purple anemone. But life in the rock pool proves tougher than Crab thinks, and he soon finds he needs his new housemates. Squirrels who squabbled. 2 greedy squirrels learn to share. Greedy squirrels Cyril and Bruce both have their sights set on a very special prize. As they chase after the very last nut of the season, they find themselves on the edge of a waterfall. Working together might be the only way to save themselves. And the smartest giant in town. George wished he wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, so when he sees a new shop selling giant-sized clothes, he decides it's time for a new look. Now he's the smartest giant in town, until he bumps into some animals who desperately need his help and his clothes. Some interesting books that you might find useful in lots of different ways. For the 11s to 18s, there is a book, The Beautiful Disciplines by Martin Saunders. Each chapter looks at a specific discipline and includes games, discussions, and challenges. There is a whole chapter dedicated to simplicity, which explores the theme of generosity and sharing. Films are also a great resource for youth groups to start a discussion, and here are 3 titles which are suitable for a wide age range. And as a final thought, sharing food, using food, or cooking together can be a good way to explore what it means to share resources and talents. One example, try cooking a pizza together, all adding different ingredients and toppings, and share the results together. Decorate cakes and share them with others. Make biscuits to give to a neighbour or friend. Food is a great way of bringing people together around a table and sharing their story with each other.